to get your D checked because you need to bump it up. Even if you're not competing any longer, I would encourage you to do so because there's many health benefits down the road for all of us with that. People with low vitamin D levels, serum levels, talk about hydroxy, also show greater incidence of depression. So it's tied into something mental cognition, hormone development, and so forth. And I'm not saying we can cure depression with D, but I see an awful lot of people who are using other things to kind of lift themselves up with different types of drugs. And I feel that even drug use can be dealt with nutritionally. No question about it. It's figuring out what's actually being triggered up in the response center. Bigger guys are greater at risk for vitamin D deficiency. So I'm dealing with a lineman who's 350. I mean, I'm at Ashland, so I won't bet. But if I wasn't, I might bet a tuna fish sandwich that he's low. And I would be right probably 99.999% of the time. I used to live outside Atlantic City. That's why I love it. The bigger they are, the greater deficiencies you will see. So guys could walk in a room and I could be like, yep, what's your sport? Yep. And you'll be right. So bigger people, greater deficiencies, greater risk for pulls and so forth. Some of the benefits, just maybe try to help convince you a little bit of things that may be. It's been associated with increasing muscular strength as the D levels become within adequate. We increase fast twitch muscle fibers by having adequate levels of D. Fast twitch is associated with something with movement, I think, and that's something I would want to encourage. So why not have an athlete be sufficient with D? We should be. It improves VO2 max. There's been studies that have indicated that. Some of these mechanisms are not fully determined. Someone's like, what's the mechanism? Some of these are undetermined, but they see it. It doesn't mean everywhere. VO2 max is how quickly and how efficient you can use your oxygen at upper levels and so forth. We want higher VO2. That's related to performance. D can do that. There's been a few articles that indicate it could be a testosterone booster, but the levels are going to be high, so if women say, should I take D, it's going to make me get hairy. Not really. It's not going to be a problem for you as far as testosterone goes. Improve immunity. So illnesses that we're fighting with, when athletes are getting up with respiratory issues, we'll look at vitamin D, especially in swimmers come in the spring, because usually when they're training is shot. And it also decreases inflammation, which is something else we want to do. We've already spoken about decreasing inflammation with EPA and DHA before. This slide up here just shows you a little bit of what we can get vitamin D from. Cod liver oil, I don't think anyone does that anymore. Used to get it poured into a spoon. I used to see that on cartoons. Well, they knew what they were doing because it was very high in vitamin D. The other ones we can see are some fish sources, and the only other ones are some fortified foods. So fortified foods and a little bit of milk. And I don't want to get into milk too much, but and then some of the other meat sources we can do with D. To get 5,000 IU, you're either going to have to do cod liver oil or you're going to have to take a vitamin D supplement. And right now, we've had such a run by our athletes that Walmart had sold out for a couple of weeks. We had all the guys and gals going over there and they couldn't find any of it. And we will start seeing the benefits. I know we will because a lot of major programs are all doing it. I wanted to hit on sleep a little bit. I say, why sleep? Because athletes don't sleep. The hardest thing to have to do, I think, is when you're traveling out of time zones. And, you know, whether you're doing whatever the level is, and you're like, well, I'm going to China to compete, or I'm going even to the West Coast, you have to adjust. If you don't adjust your training for the time of the competition, you will fail. If you don't adjust your nutrition to the change in that new time zone, you will fail. Things change. It screws with your circadian rhythm and your biological clock. It's not even fully determined why people sleep. It's really happening. People believe, though, a preponderance of us believe it's for repair, but there's more to sleep than just that. But we do know that during that time, we will see some protein synthesis and muscle and repair. We'll see some spikes in different hormones as well. Improves immunity. So a person who doesn't sleep is going to have getting ill. A person who doesn't sleep is going to break down. And then I wonder why we see athletes that break down. And I say, how can some people handle the training while other ones can't? And I would say, let's look at the components of all of these. There are some sports where you have to actually learn plays and memorize certain tasks that you have. Well, sleep is crucial. When we learn something, if someone's going over plays, and then they stay up and they have a couple smokes and a Danish and they go back out there, they're going to screw up. What they need to do is learn it, sleep, and that's where we store the memory. So any athlete who's dealing with any kind of memorization of routine or playing should look at their sleep schedules as well. Two things. Sleep latency is how long does it take before you fall asleep? So when you go to bed at night and you lay down, how long does it take for you to fall asleep? Sleep latency, that's the period of time. What we would hope is people put their head down and you're out, within a couple minutes. And some people are like that, some people are like, you're rolling around. So as people have looked at how does nutrition play a role, and we know that, before big events, big games, all those things, sleep is horrible. It's really the week prior to. That night before, you can survive it, because it's tough. You get all pumped up and so forth. But we want to encourage falling asleep quickly. That's what sleep latency is, so we want shorter time span. They looked at the foods that a person could eat, and they found that a person who consumes a high carbohydrate diet fell asleep quicker. They fell asleep quicker versus people who are eating maybe, like say, a high-fat type of a diet. So in other words, we have athletes who are getting ready for bed. Don't believe that sugar makes you hyper. That's a thing too. I mean, kids jump off a couch. You give little kids water, that will make them hyper when they're at a birthday party. It doesn't do anything with hyperactivity. So in this case, I'm like, hey, let's go high carb and hit the rack. And see how it goes. And there is some literature that points to being beneficial. Now, the other one is, like, say, duration. How many times do you wake during the night? I'm not saying, I got prostate issues, I got to take another hit to the gents. We're talking about how many waking episodes do you have? Some of you hit it, and you wake up, and the alarm's there. That's fine. But other of you, and that's going to happen, is you're waking up. And they said, how does diet impact that? What they found is the people who had the highest protein diet slept the best. They slept the best. So I'm thinking, okay, so I need to combine some carbohydrate and protein for athletes before they go to bed. Fat will help you fall asleep too, but fat will also wake you up. And I didn't even mention alcohol, because alcohol will disrupt sleep cycles tremendously. Alcohol will kill muscle synthesis and repair. Athletes, you gotta abstain from booze after playing. You just have to if you're serious, otherwise you're gonna be injured. So what we can try to do here is bump up some protein. Hey, maybe take a Meissler Casein protein drink before going to bed. Sounds like a good idea to me, and maybe then combine it with some raisins or something. Hit the rack, give it a go. Very simple, it's better than eating a bunch of chicken wings and then laying there after T-bone. So really the final thoughts that I just want to kind of leave you with is identify warning signs of poor nutrition that we spoke about. You folks are going to be right on the lines for this. You may experience some of this yourself. If you see people exhibiting those, try to get help from somebody. Listen, we all try to stay within our scope of practice, but identifying a problem is different than trying to treat it. So what I encourage all of us is to try to prevent some of these from happening. Preventing injury is best. People start complaining about soreness, you're going to work through soreness. You recover from soreness, and then you build upon that. Never work out on an empty stomach. It's a very simple rule. If you can try that, it'd be a good thing. BCAAs before, protein after, cholette with it. Like I said, 20 to 30 grams would be fine. Carbo loading, add some creatine to your carbohydrate. That will help you. Increase your DHA, EPA fatty acids. And you can do that through fish or even if you want pills. Reduce saturated fats, all the cheeses, that stuff. Reduce that post-working out. Reduce it post-working out. If you're dealing with chronic injuries, saturated fat is one thing I can talk to someone and see it's off the charts. And then look at taking vitamin D daily, 5,000 IU, which will help. And then lastly, I could add on there is focus on sleep. Talk to your athletes about sleep. We tried to bring someone in here last year talking about sleep. We need to do that all the time. Sleep is not something you just do when you're bored. Okay? So, that's all I got for you right now, but I wish you all well. I do. I wish you all well work with the athletes. They're a good group to work with. Athletes like to be told, how do I achieve? Tell me what I need to do. That's real different than some of these other people that I have to deal with. Say, well, what about this? Tell me what I need to do to be successful. And I think that's what one of our role is. Okay. Whoops.
I had a quick question.
Sure,
with the never working on empty stomachs, I know some of my athletes can be like, well, I'm going to get sick if I eat. Like, what would you consider that, like, window of timing to eat?
Well, the rule of thumb is this: the closer you have to your event, the less food you take in.
Right.
So if I say it's not a contact, just lifting and so forth, you can eat basically up to the point of going into the gym. If it's someone who's wrestling or football with contact, then I'd like to do 2 hours at the very least. But they can always drink a carbohydrate. I mean, fluids are going to be absorbed pretty quickly, and then I'm not worried about someone taking a shot to the stomach. People will say, I can't eat and exercise. And I say, well, have you ever heard of the Ironman triathlon? And I see those guys and gals eating and running, eating and swimming. Well, you can't swim and eat, but when they get out before they go, basically you can. And you have to train yourself to do that. The people are cramping up and all that because of different, it's not related to the contents of their food. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Question? Yes?
A lot of us are NCAA coaches. Some of us aren't and have a little bit more freedom. My biggest concern that I see in my sport of track and field is the amount of kids on meet day that are pounding monsters. And these, sometimes they'll have two tall boys. 99% of them are full sugar, high caffeine. What are some of your general recommendations with that and also with caffeine?
Okay. I'm a believer in caffeine. No question, caffeine helps performance. But when dealing with younger athletes, I don't want to tell them to start getting jacked on caffeine. We're already doing with Starbucks. So what's happening is the people are doing the monsters and so forth, getting some of that. What I would be concerned with is their timing of it and crashing of the carb. The caffeine decreases perceived exertion. So you feel like you're not exerting yourself as much. Fatigue, the perception of fatigue is basically longer. So you can take some caffeine, work out, and not feel fatigued. When you look at all those pretty workouts that are out there, they're basically trying to stimulate you, get a little bit of vascular dilation to make you feel pumped so you can look in the mirror and then that way kind of feel less fatigue. So caffeine is fine for someone who's used to it. When an athlete hasn't done, somebody just came the other day and said, hey, I don't drink coffee or anything, but I want to do caffeine and I want to do some pills. Someone told me I should do 300 milligrams. And I said, that's way too much. It's way too much. But the more caffeine you do, the more you become habituated and the more it takes to get that same rise out of you. So when we have people doing 1,200 milligrams of caffeine and more than that. I mean, like just bumping it all day. So that person's real different. Caffeine before an event is fine. You know, if it's really under, it depends on their usage. But if they're at 100 to 300 milligrams before events, that's nothing wrong with that. You know, the taurine's not a stimulant. People kept saying it's a stimulant, and I'm like, it's not. It's amino acid, and there may be a synergistic effect with caffeine. There may be. It's not shown. That's why taurine is in those. It may also block one of these adenosine receptors, so that's what they're thinking. But taurine itself is fine. So I would be more concerned about someone crashing from getting some very quick glucose or carb and then basically dropping below they were when they started. But it's all about timing. But I would not want someone who's never done caffeine to start doing it. At least test it before you go. But caffeine itself is safe. At dosages less than 400 or 500 milligrams in a single dose. In order to urinate positive for NCAA regs, I mean, that's what I always think about as can we keep our students legal. You'd have to do, I think it's, what is it, 1,200 milligrams within half an hour or something in order to urinate the amount, which is a lot. If you're doing that, then you should test illegal. It's just a lot. But I'm okay, not with adolescents doing all that, because they're becoming desensitized to caffeine. And they don't need to worry about perceived exertion. Any other questions on anything?
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there any benefit to using essential amino acids over branched chain amino acids, considering they contain BCAAs? Or is it kind of the same in the research? Or?
When we look at all the essential amino acids, what ends up happening is we need to see how they're absorbed. And they're absorbed with different carriers. So what we don't want is what we call competitive inhibition. In other words, we have a receptor that takes in leucine, and we have a bunch of other aminos fighting to get in, it may bump the leucine out. That would be my only concern, depending on how many of the other essentials. Because if you're taking all 11 or whatever you want to claim there might be, there could be some competition for those. The BCAAs, the difference between those and other essentials is they're metabolized in muscle. The other essentials are broken in the liver. So what ends up happening is, we know those BCAAs will make it to muscle, and then they can be there for synthesis or used for some energy if needed, which is different than the liver. And that's where the other essentials are broken down. So Some athletes will get fine results from all essentials, but I would say, look at the BCAAs, try to do a 4-2-2 ratio. To me, that just seems to be, it seems having that 4 grams and 2 grams and 2 seems to really be a good one. Yes, sir.
When's the right time to take creatine? I've heard people say take it after because it absorbs better.
There's people say take it before, take it after, or this loading of creatine. I've never seen where loading of creatine is essential unless you're dealing with a vegan. And if I'm dealing with a vegan athlete, then creatine could be a concern. Then I would say, hey, we need to bump that up a little bit because I remember getting these sources. When I look at creatine benefits, it's pretty split on before after. So it tells me that it has to do with how much storage you have in it. Because creatine is going to have, it's going to use you for anything that's explosive for 1 to 2 seconds, and it switches to carb. So any quick motion like this, maybe a step off of a base, something like that, that's creatine that it switches. So if your levels are good, either before or after, it really doesn't. It's debatable, it really is. So I don't want to say I've seen one or the other. If we're looking at combining carbohydrate, that's different for glycogen storage. But yeah, either way is fine.
What do you see as the most beneficial supplement or food or anything to be taken like intra-workout? So like say you're in the weight room and you want to be drinking, eating, consuming something, or even on the track or on the field. Is there anything that you see as the most dominant beneficial supplement or?
The things that I would recommend to someone who's training and like doing intervals or doing something else is a hit on a carb drink. And then if they want to do some BCAAs with it, that would be fun. And then they're set. Even between events, people like go out and they got to eat a bunch of food. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't have to eat between the doubleheader. You don't have to eat between certain events. You don't. You basically rehydrate, get some carb at the top you want. Because even in training, you're using up some carb. And BCAAs will then help you recover, reduce some of the NOx, and also increase muscle synthesis once you're done. And that actually, they've shown they've reduced some muscle synthesis during working out with BCAAs. So that's, and there's guys and gals who drink proteins, and it's okay. You don't want to drink that as well. It depends on your comfort zone. But over water.
Yeah.
Over water, yes, sir.
So as a multi, so you recommend having like those carb drinks between events, or would you more for, because it's 4 events or 5 events on a single day, what would you recommend between those events?
And the time frame between events is what?
Yeah,
An hour, 2 hours?
30 minutes between events.
30 minutes, I would say some carb in those early ones, and in the latter ones you should be okay.
Alright.
Yeah, here's the thing is, anytime you exercise, you're using up carbs. So people say just drink water, we're talking about hydration, that's a different thing. What I'm speaking about is maximizing your storage. The faster you're sprinting and all, it's pure carb burn. So it just makes sense to me to hit on some carb. You don't have to, you get in grams per kilogram, and we could work that out for an athlete. But basically, if you're drinking 60 to 20, you're hitting on that between, you're fine. You can cut it with water, and you'll be fine.
What's your thoughts on sodium and iodine?
Regarding intake? Regarding thyroid?
Like thyroid and stuff?
Yeah. You mean as far as bumping up iodine? If people are having iodine deficiencies or hyper issues, it's really related to thyroid issues. We get most iodine if we're eating iodine salt or eating seafood. Yeah. Iodine's fine.
Is that typically like with my meal, do sea salt with iodine?
Okay, and there's a little bit, yeah, some of that can be higher. In some of the sea salt, there's a few other minerals that may be higher. As far as sodium intake, we don't have problems with people with sodium. Our diet, most people are usually within 5,000 milligrams or higher of sodium intake, which is fine. If we have athletes who have sweat loss, and we don't have the capacity here to do a sweat loss study, because you do have people who have a lot of mineral loss in sweat. Some people don't. Some people sweat a lot. Some people don't. But as far as sodium intake and cramping, that data is really mixed. And I'm starting to lean more towards not so much dehydration or electrolyte loss. For some it may be, but that's easily replaced. But we're seeing a lot of cramping among individuals that are not dehydrated. And that tells me it's something neurological or nerve-related. So I'm not worried about sodium in any regards. That's it.
So when you talk about vitamin D, is that like 5,000 IUs across the board? Is it a little different between like seasons, between athletes in the south?
No. If you make a precursor for D out in the summer. So any sport that's indoors most of the time, those are the ones that we see really deficient. Swimmers for the most part, unless they're swimming in the summer. Basketball, almost all those players are deficient. Baseball, you get some seasonal differences. But what also happens, if you look at those, when those teams are outside, they're also in season, so they're really burning it up. So to me, 5,000 IU would be across the board regardless of the around season. Have people get checked. It takes a lot of vitamin D to just actually start to change your serum levels. You could be taking vitamin D for a few weeks and not seeing any pump at all. And then all of a sudden, then you start to see it. So it really takes a long time. There are programs that are looking at deficiencies in these that are doing 10,000 or 15,000. So people say that 5,000 sounds like a lot. It's not a lot. It really isn't, compared to what we see some other people actually maybe use dosing their evidence. And then if we could test them, then we could adjust them as well. Yes, sir.
Aside from blood work, if you're a high school coach and you're dealing with athletes on a limited resource situation, what would you recommend for athletes to kind of do that self-analysis? How they're going to do blood work or blood cancer?
Sure.
So what would be the next best thing? Like, for example, I always think it's important that those kids understand how many calories and macronutrients are getting. You know, something simple as my plate, because then opens up discussion. What else would you recommend?
Well,
Inside of the school practice.
yeah, what I would say is look at their food intake. Look at the actual foods they're consuming. If they're having fortified foods with D, even with certain athletes, it can help them a little bit. If they're consuming fish and that's part of their diet, that's okay, maybe a little eggs here. But if you find people avoiding food groups, and I talk to many people, like, I hate fish. I'm like, okay, what else? I don't drink milk. Okay. And then all of a sudden I start thinking, there's issues with D. Certain ethnicities, too, are going to be deficient in D.
So just
Tracking them and identifying someone as a risk. Anyone who cuts calories is going to be low in D. The closer you get to 1,200 calories, and then it's going calorically. In other words, the greater you restrict your diet, the more likely you are you're deficient in all these vitamins and minerals. So someone who's trying to cut weight, low in D. Big guys, low in D. Indoors, low in D. Greater pigmentation, greater risk for low in D.
with female athletes.
Female athletes are low in D too.
3 female team field sports. So, you know, a lot of them are anti-carb. You know,
And they're going to be restricting their caloric intake. And they're at risk for reds. Any sport where weight is associated with performance, which, you know, from swimming to cross country, that's where we see deficiencies because of caloric intake. And anyone who tries to avoid certain groups, and that's a risk. And outside of that, I mean, you're not going to know. But if you, I would say this, if you were to hedge and supplement them and look at injury histories and seeing chronic kind of things, that would indicate immunity function, they're constantly ill, they're having issues with tendons and so forth. Then I would say you got to look at it. And you try to bump up the food first. It'll take it. Anything else? Yes.
On the topic of carbo loading, would you say that the same results will be yielded from a slow twitch dominant athlete versus fast twitch dominant athlete? Would they both benefit from that, or is it less important for the fast twitch dominant athlete?
Yeah, you were also going to look at the sport that they're participating in too, endurance versus sprinting and so forth. My thought with carbo loading any individual is to get them maxed out with carb, or whatever it might be. We're dealing with endurance, they're maxing out, but there's only so much carb that's going to last. So sprinters and so forth are going to have adequate carb. I mean, glycogen, you're storing whatever, about 400 to 500 grams of glucose on you within muscle and some of your liver. So for sprinting, you're fine. It's going to slide through there.
It's just an issue.
But for endurance, where they can switch over to burning fats, then they're going to have to, because it's just adequate carb. So carb loading for both those athletes are important. They really are. The lower you get, the greater chances of immune fatigue and so forth. So regardless of the fibers, because those are going to be related sports. Okay.
All right, so Dr. Vanata will be around here for the next 10 or 15 minutes during the break. So we're going to pull for some door prizes now. What are we going to start with? The bearded butcher?
Well, let's do the nutrition.
Okay.
Oh, when he mentions that, what we've done is proteins are proteins. Yes and no. I will say what we've done is we've blended 4 proteins.